Welcome to Emergency Chaos, where we provide tips and tricks to make you a better ER nurse. Today we are reviewing a fundamental topic in the ER, the ABCs. The ABCs help us stay organized, ensuring life-threatening issues are caught early on and addressed in a timely manner. We're going to go over assessments and interventions as well as get into nursing specifics. Thank you for watching. Let's get into Airway. We'll first discuss assessments, then interventions. As we know, the air we breathe follows a specific path in order to get into the lungs. So when we talk about the airway, we are talking about that path. What we want to know is if this path, the airway, is it patent, meaning it's clear and open, or is it obstructed, or is there a possibility that it may become obstructed? Now, to put it simply, if the patient is speaking, the airway is intact at that moment. Your follow-up question is if it's going to stay intact. Is there any chance that it may become obstructed? But again, if your patient is speaking, the airway is intact. Now, let's continue our assessment. We need to look and listen as well as determine if the patient can handle their own airway. Now, what do I mean by handle their own airway? If they started vomiting or had increasing secretions, could they handle them without assistance, or would they choke? A quick reason for why a patient could not handle their own airway would be decreased mentation. Let's continue the assessment. Do you see any visible edema or swelling to the lips and tongue? Any abnormalities to the neck, or perhaps any facial trauma? After we do that, let's listen. Can you hear audible stridor, wheezing, or gurgling sounds? These could indicate an airway obstruction from a foreign body, secretions, vomit, or even the patient's own tongue. Now let's look inside. Is there obvious foreign body, visible blood, secretions, or vomit? Does anything look abnormal? Now, when it comes to interventions, at the top is intubation. Is their mentation so decreased that they need to be intubated? Or perhaps their oral swelling is rapidly getting worse and you have to intubate in order to keep and maintain an airway? Or on the other hand, can you do a simple head tilt chin lift or a jaw thrust and open the airway that way? Perhaps also inserting an OPA or NPA, whatever the situation calls for, and provide oxygen via a bag valve mask. You can do this while other interventions are being implemented that can lead the patient to gaining control of their own airway. For example, if the patient came in as an overdose for fentanyl, they give Narcan, the patient woke up. Now that they're awake, they can handle their own airway. Or perhaps the patient was hypoglycemic, you gave dextrose and the patient woke up and they gained control of their own airway. Let's continue. Does the patient have any vomit, blood, or secretions that need to be suctioned? That's why it's important that we have suction available so that when it comes to assessing the airway, we can suction things out if needed. And also remember to never perform blind sweeps because you can push a foreign body deeper in. And always maintain C-spine precautions if they're indicated, especially in your trauma patients. Also, remember that OPAs keep the tongue out of the way from blocking the path of the air going in. But remember that if a patient has a gag reflex, you do not want to place an OPA as it can stimulate them to vomit and they could aspirate, which will lead to other issues. Now, when placing an NPA, use plenty of lube, but remember that if there is facial trauma, you should not be placing an NPA. Now for breathing. Is the patient's breathing producing adequate ventilation and oxygenation? We assess their overall respiratory effort. Do we see chest rise and fall? Is it symmetrical? Is their breathing nice and effortless, or is it fast and labored? Is it deep or shallow? Is it slow? Is it too slow, or perhaps it's too fast? Perhaps they are tripoding. So overall, does it look like they are in respiratory distress? Then a key important piece of information is the pulse oximetry. How is the pulse oximetry? Is it low? Do we need to address it by giving oxygen? And then remember to auscultate. Do we hear good air movement bilaterally? Did you pick up any wheezing, rhonchi, or crackles? But again, most importantly, did you hear air movement when you auscultated the patient's lungs? Please note that if a patient's respiratory effort is increased and labored, but there is minimal air movement on auscultation, you need to act quick because there is probably minimal oxygenation and ventilation occurring. Also note that labored breathing takes up a lot of energy and it cannot be maintained. So keep an eye out for these patients, especially when they can't even get a word out. Also note to palpate for possible broken ribs. Do you see equal chest rise and fall, or do you note a flail chest or no movement on one side of the chest that can be indicative of a pneumothorax? Also, how does the stat bedside chest x-ray look? As for interventions, when it comes to breathing, how is the pulse ox again? Do we need to give oxygen? If so, administer via a nasal cannula, a non-rebreather, or a bag valve mask, whichever the situation calls for, until more appropriate interventions can be implemented, like high flow, BiPAP, or even intubation if necessary. Other interventions include needle decompression or chest tubes for pneumohemothorax. Here, super quick, I made a mini book out of the topics we've discussed on the channel, plus content from future videos like IV tips and what to expect during a cardiac arrest. If it sounds like something that might interest you, or perhaps you just want to support the channel, please check it out on Amazon. The link is provided down below in a pinned comment. Thank you. Now let's get into circulation. With circulation, we need to ask if the patient has good perfusion, and we assess this by looking at the patient's skin color, capillary refill, quality of their pulses, blood pressure, heart rate, ECG rhythm, signs of bleeding, and even mentation. For example, if the patient is awake and alert and speaking in complete sentences, we can assume they are getting adequate perfusion to their brain. On the other hand, if your patient's blood pressure is low, the heart rate is high, cap refill is delayed, and the pulses are weak, the patient may be in shock and in need of immediate interventions. So when the patient arrives, we get them on the monitor quickly, connecting the BP cuff, placing ECG leads, and pulse oximetry to collect these pieces of information as soon as possible. As for interventions, you get your patient on the monitor, get IV or IO access, and consider starting fluids, blood products, or even vasopressors depending on the likely cause of the shock. We address the ECG rhythm if needed. Depending on the cause, you may also have to send the patient to surgery. However, fluids are the typical first-line agent because they are easily available when the patient is in or getting close to being in shock. But again, for interventions, get the patient on the monitor so you can get a set of vital signs, get IV access, and consider starting fluid in the other interventions as indicated by the patient's presentation. Now, let's talk about disability or neuro. In regards to the assessment, the gold standard is the GCS score. Essentially, it provides a standardized way of determining how alert a patient is, whether they're fully alert or comatose, in a numerical form. We talk about GCS scoring on another video. However, the main point is that if a patient has a GCS less than 8, you need to start considering possible intubation. However, perhaps the most important key point when it comes to altered or comatose patients is that we need to check a blood sugar to ensure that the patient's symptoms are not simply related to hypoglycemia. Again, if your patient's coming in, they're altered, they're out of it, check a blood sugar. We also assess the pupils, noting if they are pearl, pinpoint, or dilated, as it can help narrow a diagnosis for the providers. Remember that opioids cause pinpoint pupils, and different toxins and drugs may affect the eyes and therefore provide clues for the providers and the team. Next, how is sensation and motor function throughout the body, especially in the extremities? Are the grips equal on both sides? Can they push-pull without any issues? Is pedal flexion and extension equal on both sides? Can they lift all extremities without issues against resistance? Is the patient speaking clearly? Are they alert, oriented to person, location, time, and situation? And for interventions, include giving dextrose for hypoglycemia, giving Narcan if an overdose is suspected, getting a head CT, and assessing for head bleeds and other pathologies. When it comes to exposure/environment, we have to fully expose the patient when warranted to ensure nothing was missed. Of course, you must keep patient privacy, but you want to ensure that nothing gets missed, like a gunshot or a stab wound that you didn't see, or needle marks, or even perhaps an abscess that may be the cause of why the patient is so sick. We also decontaminate when needed, and we check the patient's temperature as well. And finally, don't forget to warm your patients unless indicated. Let's review what we must be doing as the nurse. It starts off with having your rooms ready beforehand so that they're ready for business. Ensure you're adequately stocked with bag valve masks, suction, and the supplies necessary to connect the patient onto the monitor to obtain vital signs. Is the POC glucose machine ready to go? Do you have IV poles and pumps readily available? Ensure the adequate staff members that need to be called are there. This includes RT, your providers, surgery or trauma teams, and additional staff when more assistance is necessary. Get the patient on the monitor. place IV access, draw labs, and begin resuscitating as ordered. Coordinate with CT and X-ray as needed. Coordinate with the OR as indicated. Ensure you talk to the blood bank if needed. Man the crash cart. If your patient gets intubated, you know they're going to need sedation medications, a Foley, an OG tube. If they get a chest tube placed, keep track of the output and the device. For the blood, if you're going to be administering blood, is the rapid transfusion readily available, or pressure bags for fluids, and keep track of interventions and assessments to ensure everything is documented accordingly. And at the end, which I think is one of the more important things as well, ensure your patient is comfortable as possible, of course, and ensure someone comes to explain the plan to them. Thank you so much for watching. I would really appreciate a like and a follow, and if you learned something today and would like to help support the channel, please consider getting the mini book I put together on Amazon. The link will be in a pinned comment below. As always, you should continue nurturing your curiosity and continue learning daily. With that in mind, please watch my other videos, and I've also listed my favorite ER nursing related books in the description text and in the comments as well. So when you get a chance, please check them out. And if you've learned something recently while at work that may be helpful to other new ER nurses, please consider sharing it in the comments so that we can all benefit and help each other out. Thank you. And as always, teamwork makes the dream work. And here at Emergency Chaos, we are proactive, not reactive.